Welcome to The Blast Zone, the podcast where we dig up the bombs that shook Hollywood and try to find out why they went up in flames. This week, if only this script had Oscar shit written all over it, this is Hollywood Homicide. Welcome to The Blast Zone.
Welcome to The Blast Zone.
We are not a podcast about bad movies. We are a podcast about movies that did badly.
That's right.
I'm Jon Drake, in-house film critic of my Letterboxd account.
And I'm Ian Dukes. I'm a person with thoughts and feelings, and some of them are about movies.
Movies like Hollywood Homicide, unfortunately. But before we get into that, Ian, how are you doing this week?
Well, this week, I took the time to really think deeply about this question, and I got nothing.
Oh.
I'm just living life, trying to survive each day, scratching off the rings on my Apple Fitness app, like Steve McQueen in a French prison, Papillon. I don't know why that image came to mind, but
not sure.
That's what I feel like sometimes.
Papillon, good movie, though.
Yeah, old school. How are you doing?
I'm good. I feel like I've experienced the full spectrum of human experience in the past 10 days.
Wow.
I went to Buffalo last weekend for my long-awaited nacho crawl.
Oh, my gosh.
I believe I've talked about this on the pod before. If I haven't, it is a long-standing tradition with me and a group of my friends and my wife. My wife joined for the first time this year, but I think she'll be a regular addition now.
Excellent.
But we basically pick a city, go there, find between 12 and 20 nacho places that sound good.
That many?
Or places that have nachos and sound good. We don't hit them all. We hit 12 this year, and that's the record.
Okay.
But you got to build in backups because sometimes there's too long of a wait, or they took them off the menu unexpectedly, or they're doing brunch now and you can't get it.
Oh, wild. Okay.
So you got to have contingencies built in. And we just walk from one bar to the next and get an order of nachos to share, and everyone gets a drink, and then we finish it, get up, go to the next place. And we, like I said, we did 12 this year, our record.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So last weekend was full of binge drinking and adult fun.
Yeah.
And then this morning I went to an Easter egg hunt at the park with my kids. So I'm really living the fullest experience I can.
That's wonderful. Did you have a little sunshine for that?
There was a little sunshine, but it was also like 38 degrees and windy as all hell. So it was fucking freezing. And of course I only wore a hoodie because I'm an idiot. Nice. I didn't check first, but my kids had coats, so at least they were okay.
Good. You're looking out for the important things.
And they got plenty of eggs, lots of candy.
Nice.
And it's not even Easter yet. They still have Easter next week, so they'll get more.
Head start. Way to go.
Overall, good week. And what did you happen to watch? We had an extra week off, so I assume you watched loads of brand new movies.
I watched a mix of things. The thing that I'm bringing to tell people about is a movie called Greyhound. It's relatively new. Came out in July 2020. It was an Apple TV Plus release. It had its theatrical release canceled due to COVID. This movie was written by Tom Hanks. He has sole credit on the screenplay, adapted it from a novel, and it's starring Tom Hanks. So you got to like Tom Hanks going into this thing. In this movie, he is a ship's captain, and all Captain Hanks does is quote the Bible and sink U-boats. And I thought it would be kind of boring, but I turned it on and I not only got interested in it, but somehow I was moved to tears at various points in the movie. And I just realized that I'm an old white guy now crying at World War II movies. But I thought the good things about this movie is that it's a really great example of how you can build a movie around using tradecraft and jargon in a way that's really, you feel smart forgetting what they're talking about because it's all this tactics. Mr. So-and-so, bring us around 160 degrees, rudders, half staff, and all this kind of totally garbling that. But 90% of the dialogue is just commands like that. But it's fun because you can figure out what they're doing, and it's fascinating, and it feels really real. And then there's this stirring part where it's an older guy who just takes his first command of a ship, and he's in charge of protecting this convoy. And it's just an action movie. You just like get through the long night, which is actually like a long 2.5 days. It's pretty fun.
This movie does sound interesting, but I can't shake the feeling that every Tom Hanks movie since 2010, except for maybe The Post and Won't You Be My Neighbor, are like fake movies made by AI. Like, I think you thought you watched a movie, but you just watched like a really long trailer or something. I don't know. Like none of these movies feel real. What was A Man Called Otto? Get the fuck out of here. He's got the Chappie ripoff that just came out. What are these movies?
I watched the beginning of the Chappie one. That was pretty fun too. Tom Hanks is still, he's still America's darling, no matter what else you can say about the guy. Like he charms when he's on the screen, and he managed to do it again. To me, he got me. Even if it was a simulation, I was got.
But he keeps picking these movies that, like, when I read the premise, I'd rather hit my balls with a hammer. Fuck, like, they all sound so boring.
He's also a fuddy-duddy.
Yeah, he's taking on a lot of these, like, elder statesman roles now, too. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't think that's his vibe as much as he thinks it is. Like, he's a silly little goose. Be a silly goose more.
He is. He's really fun as a silly goose. I first latched onto him all the way back in, like, Bosom Buddies when I was like, who are these hilarious guys, Peter Scolari and Tom Hanks? I love these kids. They weren't weren't kids. Well, I'm not that old. They were still 10 years older than me, but talk about a career.
Yeah. I also watched a Tom Hanks movie for my show and tell this week. Creed 3.
Oh,
wait, he's not in that. Directed by none other than Adonis Creed himself, Michael B. Jordan. Michael B. directing. More like.
How'd he do? Was that his first one or did he helm some of the others?
I think that's his first one. Let me see. Yep. First directorial effort. And yeah, he did a good job. You know, these Creed movies, we're 3 in now. And I think they're trying to make it a little more grounded than like the Rocky franchise, which by the third one was kind of getting a little silly.
Got the cartoony.
But he does bring in some pretty stylistic choices towards the end of the movie, especially that kind of make it feel like he's the same way we say bands have their whole life to make their first album. They've been thinking about it and perfecting it for years and years. Like he clearly had some ideas he wanted to use for forever. And like they were really had a clear point of view. He clearly thought about it quite a bit. And it made the final fight scene in the movie really interesting, different from anything I've seen in a boxing movie before.
That's inspiring because that's where you think that you might bog down. It's like, okay, the movie might be good, but I know I got to watch these long, dragged out boxing matches that like, how are they going to keep my interest? But that's really interesting to know.
Well, you were a boxing fan, weren't you?
Yeah, but not necessarily a movie boxing fan.
Movie boxing is wild, man. They are throwing punches just like
it's a whole other thing.
Swinging their whole hips, throwing them from their back pocket and landing all of them and nobody gets hurt. I will say it would probably lose something if you didn't watch Creed 2.
Okay.
And I know you haven't watched Creed 2 yet. So
I got to do my homework.
I would check Creed 2 first and then Creed 3. But they're both really good, so you're not missing much. And I know we're not really sure where he stands right now in terms of is he a good guy or a bad guy in real life. But Jonathan Majors just brought really great energy to the movie that it needed because Michael B. Jordan, I don't know if he has a ton of range as an actor. Like he's very effective at a few things, but he can kind of be always on the same level. And Jonathan Majors is just going from one extreme to the other in this movie. Like he's gregarious and charming, and then he's scary and threatening and intimidating. Like he brings a dynamic quality to the movie that I think was lacking in Creed 2 and probably Creed 1 too, because Creed 1 really doesn't have much of an antagonist at all. It's really just more about his personal journey. So as of right now, I'd say my favorite Creed, which is high praise because I really enjoy those movies.
Very positive review. I'm interested to check it out.
Can I talk about Creed for about another 90 minutes?
Okay.
Because I don't want to talk about Hollywood Homicide. This movie fucking sucks. But Ian, Hollywood Homicide, what'd you know about it? I mean, it was filmed in your neck of the woods, right? So did you remember when they were making it? Were you friends with Harrison Ford at the time?
I was not. No, Harrison and I were not talking. This movie just kind of missed me. And thinking back, I can't say for sure if I was really ever aware of it. This came out in a period where I was probably holding on to a pretty strong negative impression of Josh Hartnett at the time, which just stemmed from when he first came on screen and started doing things like Pearl Harbor. I'm going to throw that out. I don't know if he was in that movie, but I'm going to blame him for being in it, whether or not he was. But he seemed like a hunky heartthrob that I was just not down with. So even if I had heard of this movie at the time, I would have not wanted to see it.
So when this movie came out, it had pretty horrible buzz. At this point, I was 16 when it was in production, and I was like reading the trades, really interested in the behind the scenes stuff. I think I was on like Cool News, reading about all the drama.
Okay, yeah.
And this movie was just a treasure trove for gossipy types because famously Hartnett and Ford didn't get along during it. There was lots of reports of Ford being a diva. I mean, he's kind of a dick, right? He's kind of a famous asshole.
Yeah, he's some kind of curmudgeon. We don't know if he's actually like unlikable, but he's certainly weird.
I think he's probably likable once he thinks you're not talking to him just because he's Harrison Ford. I think the people that have known him for a long time think he's charming, but yeah, he seems slow to warm up to new people. I would love to see him and Tommy Lee Jones just sit down and try to out-grumpy each other. But yeah, this movie came out and I had no interest in it. It looks stupid. I didn't know what tone it was going for. It feels like at least 10 years older than it actually is. Even in the trailers and shit, it just looks old and feels dated, and all it's kind of like little stereotypes and tropes it tries to roll out all feel like they're from the fucking 80s. It's poorly made. It's a bad movie.
I saw you made a note about the movie feeling old, and I feel like we've said that about one or two other movies recently on the show.
Not Big Wednesday. That did not feel like a 1965 movie.
No, Big Wednesday felt old because it was old. Maybe it was War Dogs we were saying was old, or even Lord of War.
I think it was, you said it about Lord of War for sure. I don't know what other movie we said it about, but definitely Lord of War, you brought that up.
And I was trying to think, is that ever a good thing? Because you could be throwing that around at some point as a compliment. Okay, this movie feels like a classic movie of the 70s, not a cheap movie of the 90s or 2000s. But mostly when we've been using it, it's like this movie just feels like it's a step behind. Like it's trying to rehash tropes that are already tired and worn out by the time it came out, and it should have known better. And this is kind of that. Although maybe the tropes in this are timeless, and maybe that's why the filmmakers fooled themselves into thinking this could work as a blockbuster. It's like, hey, it's buddy cops, it's LA crime drama and intrigue and romance, and it's all this stuff. It's just timeless Hollywood stuff. It's going to work. And it just didn't work.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point because there can be a situation where making a movie that feels older than it is a bonus and it has some upside. But I feel like the language we use around those examples is different. We call it a throwback or something like that. And when we're saying just this movie feels old, I think what we're saying is that like everyone else has moved on. They know better and you don't.
This is just tired. And its attempts to be current in terms of interweaving this thread of hip hop, a music mogul, and this rap music scene, that's where it's most ham-handed. And so if it thinks it's bringing itself up to date with that, it is not.
For a movie that deals so heavily in Black culture, I'm not convinced Ron Shelton's ever met a Black person. This movie seems to have a deep disrespect for Black culture and Black people, honestly, which feels like a lofty accusation, allegedly. But like, I stand behind it.
I know what you mean. I teetered on the edge of, is this movie actually disrespectful? Is it actually carrying in some assumptions of sort of white significance and privilege? Or is it just doing those accidentally by not paying attention or not taking its subject matter seriously enough? But it kind of could go either way, and maybe it doesn't really matter. It can leave you with a bad taste in your mouth regardless.
Right. As we're always saying, it doesn't matter their intentions. If we're asking the questions, then they failed on whatever they were trying to do. But do you want me to talk about the making of the movie? Get into the production a little bit?
Yeah, let's hear how this thing happened.
All right. Robert Souza was a homicide detective in the LAPD Hollywood division who happened to moonlight as a real estate broker towards the end of his law enforcement career. Apparently, this is such a wild and zany premise, he thought he should write a movie about it. At the same time, former minor league baseball infielder Ron Shelton, best known for writing and directing some of the best sports movies of all time like Bull Durham, Tin Cup, and White Men Can't Jump, was looking for his next project after a couple of high-profile flops in boxing comedy Play It to the Bone and LA cop drama Dark Blue. He stuck with LA Cops and decided to tackle Souza's story, co-writing the script with Souza and planning to direct the movie, which was now titled Hollywood Homicide.
They opted for that over the more literal title, Career Suicide.
John Travolta and Joseph Gordon-Levitt were cast in the lead roles of Joe Gavilan and Casey Calden, with Gavilan being the veteran Souza proxy and Calden being his young vegan yoga instructor partner who wants to leave the force and become an actor. Travolta and Gordon-Levitt would walk away from the project and be replaced by Harrison Ford and Josh Hartnett, which honestly seemed like a big upgrade for the movie's box office potential at the time.
This movie was set to take off like Harrison Ford's Cessna.
With a sizable $75 million budget, production was underway. Filmed exclusively in the LA area from August to December of 2002, with reshoots happening in January 2003 and April 2003, the shoot was not a smooth one. The famously prickly Ford, who hated the movie and later admitted to only doing it for the money, clashed with his young co-star Hartnett, with Ford even allegedly calling Hartnett a punk, while Hartnett countered that Ford was a, quote, old fart. Things were still noticeably icy between them on the press tour for the movie, though Hartnett would admit that he and Ford started getting along better towards the end of filming.
Hartnett became almost like a son to Ford, like Kylo Ren.
With a release date of June 13th, 2003 set, which if you're keeping track is only 2 months after reshoots were still going on, the movie's buzz was abysmal. Critics would savage it as it sits at 30% on Rotten Tomatoes, and audiences largely ignored it, despite the significant star power on display as it opened in 5th place with only $11 million. It would leave theaters with a worldwide gross of only $51.1 million, a major blemish on all involved, and is mostly forgotten today, except when people are talking about how Harrison Ford is kind of an asshole.
Yeah, we don't have a big mystery to dive into here on why it bombed. People weren't even that into the idea of it. And then obviously the word of mouth and the reviews sunk whatever interest was left.
Yeah, and the marketing materials for this movie are very confused and kind of lack of focus, which is another thing we go back to a lot, is they didn't market this movie very well because it's a weird movie to market. It's centered around a mass murder, which is inherently a serious subject, but it treats it with kid gloves. And who is this movie for? It's PG-13, but I feel like you either have to go hard in one direction or the other, and they just kind of straddle the line between we're going to treat the situation with the gravity it deserves and we're just going to make a lot of jokes.
I didn't even have time to reflect on how creepy that tonal clash is, but now that I think of it, like there's this brutal murder where this 4 guys in a rap group are machine gunned down backstage, but one of them ends up dead on the middle of the floor of the club, and yet in the first moments of the investigation there's big broad jokes, and then the club owner becomes just a jokey joke the whole rest of the time. No one's ever really that freaked out or worried about the brains and blood all over the floor.
Every character in this movie just wanders into frame so Harrison Ford's character could try to sell them a house, and then they leave just as quickly. And it's like, okay, like what did that accomplish? This movie fucking sucks, man. This movie's terrible.
It's supposed to be hilarious, I guess, in their eyes. And it's, as you pointed out, that comes from a real thing. Like this real cop told us that the homicide detectives all moonlight and he was a real estate agent. And like, yeah, that is actually kind of interesting because you kind of want to see how that plays out. It doesn't play out very realistically. it just becomes this annoying running gag that just gets run into the ground so hard. And it's not very funny even from the start.
And they have to give Calden actually, we should start going through we're ready to pick this movie apart, piece by piece, but we got to get through the plot first. So do you want to walk us through the first leg? I was ready to just jump in and start ripping on this, but I was like, no one's going to know what I'm talking about. We haven't told them what's going on yet.
All right, here we go. Backstage at a Hollywood nightclub, the members of an up-and-coming rap group called H2O Click are murdered by a pair of gunmen. There's one eyewitness, but he flees the scene and goes into hiding. So a pair of homicide detectives take on the case. One is the old and cranky Joe Gavilan, played by Harrison Ford. The other is the young and hunky Casey Calden, played by Josh Hartnett. Detective Gavilan moonlights as a real estate agent, and his financial woes have made him desperate to sell a house, including his own. Detective Calden moonlights as a yoga teacher, but what he really wants to do is quit the police and become an actor. Gavilan spends his days answering phone calls about real estate deals, and his nights calling into a psychic talk radio host named Ruby the Night Owl, played by Lena Olin. Calden spends his days teaching yoga and his nights having sex with his students. Unbeknownst to our detectives, the two gunmen from the club meet up with a music mogul named Antoine Sartain, played by Isaiah Washington, to collect their pay for the hit he ordered. Sartain's security guy, an ex-cop named Leroy, played by Dwight Yoakam, kills the gunmen, torches their car, and assures Sartain that the police won't trace things back to him because Leroy's old buddy Benny Macco is going to keep Gavilan too busy to solve this case.
Straight off the bat, I just want to point out to any hip-hop fans we have listening that H2O Click, actually the 504 boys from New Orleans, that were signed to Master P's No Limit Records.
Of course, that makes sense.
Man was always looking for an angle to get his axe up in front of people. So let's talk about probably the best thing about this movie. Why don't you take the reins on that?
The opening credits, and it's all downhill from there, is a fun montage of signs and other things in Hollywood that say the word Hollywood on them, starting with the Hollywood sign itself, and then just going around to street signs and businesses and bus benches and everything. And it's this very stylish little arty montage set to music. And overall, I guess we got to give the movie credit for that and the fact that they didn't go to Vancouver to shoot this. It's actually all shot in and around Hollywood. And for that reason, it gives you some little taste of fun LA flavor.
Yeah, apparently the final title sequence done by legendary title sequence creator Wayne Fitzgerald before he retired.
Oh, nice.
I think he could have come back for one more just to get this off the end of his resume.
He's got nothing to be ashamed of. When the first scene starts after his titles, he's like, I'm done and I did good. And at that point, it's still a good movie.
Yeah, my expectations were already pretty low just because, like I said, I knew the buzz on this movie. But one fun thing about this movie is spotting people that would go on to be bigger actors, because there's a few. One we see almost immediately. In the first scene of the movie, we get a glimpse of young Anthony Mackie.
Yeah.
This is pre-8 Mile, right?
It must be, right?
No, this came out a year after 8 Mile. So he already had a sizable role in a pretty major Hollywood movie, and he's taken a role as gunman number 2.
Yeah, he had already outclassed this movie. And so it was actually to his benefit that he disappears, even though now we see him, we go, oh, Anthony Mackie's going to be in this. And then he's gone pretty quick.
Very charming actor, but doesn't get much to do in here. I don't even know if he gets a line.
Yeah, he might say something as he cocks his gun and starts shooting people.
You get a lot of good glimpses of his face, so we're clear that it's definitely him.
Yes, for sure.
And then the big nightclub shootout happens, which we kind of discussed, but played for laughs in a strange way, which I don't really understand.
It's one of the really offensive story points that's going to come around later as the eyewitness goes in a back room and pisses his pants, leaves a puddle. And we'll get back to that later because it's that third act, or that's the end. No, that's the end of the second act. You'll hear us do a lot more sighing in act 2, but it's not off to a great start. And then as soon as the killing is done and the detectives show up, it's all about this cheesy odd couple relationship, but it's really kind of a ham-handed set of characterizations to try to introduce this. Did you think?
They are the most broadly sweeping ideas of a manly man and a turn of the century metrosexual, I guess was the term they would have used back then, crunchy granola type, because Harrison Ford's character, he can shoot a gun real good. He's not into the touchy-feely stuff. He's all about just the facts and does gravelly voice. And then there's Josh Hartnett, who's a vegan. He likes bean sprouts and he teaches yoga. And we're supposed to be like, how are they ever going to work together? So fucking tired. It's like 1987's idea of what a non-masculine man would be, is the Josh Hartnett character in this movie. But neither of them feel like real people at any point because they're just made to conflict with each other. Their whole purpose is to be two complete opposite ends of the spectrum in every way.
And I don't know if I was tainted because I heard your quick version of the gossip on this movie was these guys really didn't get along and they had some real problems doing these scenes. So that tainted my vision of what I was seeing on the screen from the get-go. And made me not sure how I would perceive it if I didn't know. But like the chemistry is terrible. So whatever could have been salvageable from this script, it was not salvaged because these guys were not into it.
Kind of expected their characters to have an adversarial relationship because of the buzz around the movie, but then when they're supposed to be like friends, it played worse somehow because that's clearly not their vibe.
It doesn't actually get fierce. It's all like, yes, we can't understand each other, but we get along and there's never actual fighting. Is there a point where where there's a split and they like actually have to come back together? There's not really, right?
No, there's really no conflict between the two of them.
It's all just style.
Even when they're doing like some of the worst police work, like Calden lets somebody just steal his gun and shoot up a parking lot, and Gavilan is just shooting at his own car in a crowded LA street. Oh no, actually that's Calden again too. Why is he on the force? He needs to get gone.
He's a hazard.
He's a liability.
He's bad. That scene is awful. I don't think I even brought up that scene in trying to write the synopsis.
Because it does nothing. It serves no purpose.
No, it was just a funny set piece of him shooting at what he thinks is some car thieves, but it's repo men. Because remember when we told you that Gavilan's finances are bad? They are.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the parking lot, which is also another scene that serves no purpose.
The parking lot is another no purpose scene. It's just man, this movie is full of scenes that it seemed like good ideas when they wrote them
You
down.
could say that about most movies. Oh, okay. I thought you were just going to be like, man, this movie is full of scenes.
No, it is. I mean, it's overstuffed with scenes in general, but they're also, as we'll get into in the second act, when it starts piling on with ill-advised and ill-executed scenes where it's like, these all probably sounded good in an outline form. You're like, this is the scene where this happens. Like, oh yeah, that should definitely happen in our movie. But then you got to execute and they do not. So they have to get to the outcome that they want, but it doesn't make sense because they didn't know how to get there. But I'll try to give some examples of what I'm talking about when we get to those.
When the time comes. But before that, we got to talk about Julius.
Yeah.
And Julius played by Master P of the Charlotte Hornets. For those that don't know, Master P briefly tried to make it as an NBA player.
I remember that. I wasn't really aware of his music at the time, but he certainly came on to a national stage for the NBA effort he made, which was sincere. Like he was really trying.
He's by all accounts a very talented athlete, but I just don't think he was quite an NBA level. But he's certainly not a very talented rapper. He is a terrible rapper.
Okay, I didn't know that. See, I never tried to listen to him.
So is Silk the Shocker. I think C Murder was the best rapper on No Limit Records. But Master P's always had this like weird obsession with breaking into other industries, which is not like an uncommon thing for people in the music industry, but he picks the strangest things. Like acting, sure, that's kind of standard. But then he wanted to play in the NBA. He tried to make his son into a TV star. He's got aspirations beyond the music industry, but he just tends to not be very good at them. And he was much more of a marketing guy, I think, with No Limit Records, is where a lot of their success came from, was from his idea of how to get their product in front of people. Like he didn't make the beats. He wasn't a good rapper. He was kind of like a showman. I think he also financed the record label, whatever means he did. And he raps about it. I'm not talking out of class, but he's just wooden. He was so rich, and he was basically Antoine Sartain. Like there was all accusations about him being kind of a shady record label executive who pulled a fast one on a lot of his artists. Not quite as many as the other big New Orleans rap label CEO, Baby, aka Birdman from Cash Money. He's like really famous for being kind of a shady businessman. But Master P had his own accusations out there too. It's just funny that he would choose to put himself under a microscope and have a pretty sizable role in this movie that's about a rap record label kind of abusing their acts.
Yeah. And to be clear to anyone who hasn't seen this movie, that's not at all what he is in this movie. He owns the nightclub where the shooting happens. And then after that, everything he's about is nothing to do with the music industry. It's all about him wanting to buy a house and Harrison Ford's character trying to sell him one.
He's trying to buy a fucking like Martin Landau's house, right?
Yeah.
Why is he in this movie like an hour and 40 minutes in when his role is basically done now?
He's so in this movie.
Like, this is the last we need to talk to him.
There are way too many masterpiece scenes.
And he pops up 5 more times. Just to be clear, Ian said Master P, not masterpiece. There are no masterpiece scenes in this movie.
There are no masterpiece scenes, but there are far too many masterpiece scenes.
Yes.
Who else is in this movie? A couple decent little roles that were smaller and maybe better because they were small.
Yeah, we got my boy. We were just talking about him. It might have been off mic, but we were talking about Lou Diamond Phillips pretty recently. Like, I dig Lou Diamond Phillips. I think he deserved better than he got. Oh, because when we were talking about Poker Face and Benjamin Bratt off mic, I was like, I always kind of conflated the two of them in my mind. mind as like guys who didn't get the respect they deserved.
And similar handsome faces.
Right. They do look a little bit alike, which is probably where that comparison came from in my mind. But I like both of them. But unfortunately, Lou Diamond Phillips is forced to play a prostitute named Wanda. And there's just a lot of like very early 2000s gay panic jokes baked into the script here.
Maybe I need to go back and watch this movie more closely, which I shall never do. But you think it's going to be that. But to me, it was like, oh, it turns out this is just a cop and everyone else was busy. And so he had to go undercover as a woman. So it's just a male cop in drag doing his job, pretending to be a prostitute on the street. But did they actually make jokes about his sexuality?
No. I agree with you that in the moment they handled it with class.
Okay.
And no, I don't think the Lou Diamond Phillips character is supposed to be gay or transgender. But it comes up later when Hartnett and Ford are talking and he's like, oh, I saw that prostitute get in your car the other night. And Harrison Ford's like, that was a guy. And then Josh Hartnett's like, I don't need to know that, man. You know, and that's where it comes out, not in the moment.
Okay, yes. Then your point is absolutely valid and I agree with you. And I guess I just sort of glossed over that because everything that comes out of those two guys' mouths is cringy. And that was just one more thing.
Absolutely fair. And then you wrote down Eric Idle here as an arrested celebrity.
Yes. Did you notice that he was in the movie? It was about
I did not.
5 seconds.
If you had not said something, I would not have no idea.
He gets off one joke, which he does really well because obviously Eric Idle is hilarious. But it's like another example of how the movie's a little bit overstuffed or a lot overstuffed. And he's being marched into this Hollywood police precinct in handcuffs saying, I've never paid for sex. And then he says, oh, hello, Lorena, or whatever, as he passes by some of the prostitutes. It's like, good to see you.
Was that a Pete Townsend reference? Because right around this time, Pete Townsend was arrested for possessing child pornography.
Okay.
And his whole argument was he was doing research for like a documentary he was doing.
Is that what Eric Idle says in the scene? Yes, they might have.
I was doing research.
They might have lifted that as a nod.
But let me see. Let me just go to his Wikipedia. Yep, 2002. So.
Okay. Yeah, they were definitely riffing on that then. I didn't pick up on that.
He was on the sex offender registry for 5 years, beginning in 2003, after admitting he had used his credit card to access a child pornography website. You don't have to keep all of this in there, but I do think they were trying to draw having a British guy in LA randomly talking about it was for research. I'm not a child predator. Feels very pointed.
Yeah, I wonder if the note that it struck for me was Eddie Murphy getting hassled by the cops with the prostitute in his car. Did that happen around the same time?
That was 97 was the Eddie Murphy one. So that was a little bit expired already, but not that this movie would be
They freshened it up with a little Pete Townsend twist to it.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
Yeah. Why the fuck am I talking about Dwight Yoakam for the second time in a couple months? Why is Dwight Yoakam such a fixture on our podcast?
I like Dwight Yoakam. Did we determine that he was someone that we didn't want to talk about in the past, or you just confused or why he's popping up?
I think if you asked me to name two roles of Dwight Yoakam's, they would honestly be Hollywood Homicide and Crank High Voltage, because I just never really paid attention to him as an actor, and I don't like him in either of these roles. Okay. So I feel like I just have a bias against him now.
He earned, for me, so much goodwill in Sling Blade that he coasted on that for the next 30 years.
I got to rewatch Sling Blade. I haven't seen it in a long time. But he's not really bad in this. He's serviceable. It's kind of a goofy role. I think he's kind of miscast, but I don't think he's bad necessarily. Like, he doesn't have the menace that I would look for from this guy.
Not quite. Although he's capable of being really nasty, and he kind of pulls it off in the end when it's the big showdown, but he doesn't quite look the part.
Yeah, grizzled LAPD veteran detective, moonlights as muscle for a rap record label.
Yeah.
Not the guy that comes to mind. There were plenty of LAPD detectives that did that if you research the Tupac and Biggie killings.
Yes.
At all. I think David Mack was the most prominent one.
A lot of real, everywhere you poke around LAPD history, you're going to find creepy shit. So I don't know, like when we talk about that, the serious parts of the movie, and this is where it gets serious again, we see Leroy and Antoine Sartain kill the hitman that they had just hired and torch their car. This is like hardcore crime movie stuff where it's supposed to be, oh, that's brutal and violent. And the tonal shift doesn't work in this movie. I'm trying to think of cop movies that are comedic that it does. And the one that comes to mind is 48 Hours going all the way back.
I was going to say Beverly Hills Cop, which same kind of idea.
Same kind of co-star. The co-star in 48 Hours, and then he was the star in Beverly Hills Cop. But yeah, there was something about those. And even Lethal Weapon, which has a lot of broad comedy in it, has some really dark moments.
They brought more. The first Lethal Weapon does not have that much broad comedy in it, but like the later ones, they really lean into it.
They got way more comedic. But yeah. So I feel like you get why Ron Shelton was trying to blend those two things. He just wasn't as good at it as any of those good movies that we just mentioned.
And like the movie Ron Shelton did before this was Dark Blue, with a story by James Ellroy and a script by David Ayer. So like he was embroiled in LA cop drama and just grittiness. Like fucking James Ellroy. Most of what I know about the LAPD sordid history comes from his books. And he lost the plot here. He couldn't kind of balance those two conflicting tones.
It's a tough balancing act. Gave himself a really hard task and it just didn't quite work.
I did want to reserve some praise, and only a little bit, bit because he seems like a real dickhead in real life, allegedly.
Allegedly.
For Isaiah Washington, because I think he's pretty good as Antoine Sartain.
Yes.
He's kind of like a Suge Knight, Sean Combs proxy to some degree. Like Sean Combs was always rumored to be doing shady things from a business point of view, and Suge Knight was doing things shady from a, if you don't sign this contract, I'll throw you off this balcony point of view, which
yes.
Sartain looks like to balance more because he went to jail for a white collar crime, but is now just straight up murdering his acts that want to leave the record label off of it. So he's got the best of both worlds.
Yeah, and he plays both those sides in different scenes, and he's slick and he's intimidating in equal parts, and it's pretty good considering how weak the script is.
He wasn't on Grey's Anatomy yet, so he hadn't really broken out, but I first remember noticing him in Out of Sight. He's really good in Out of Sight.
Oh, okay.
As a completely terrifying boxer with a detached retina who's now just muscle for Don Cheadle's character.
Oh, nice. Man, I got to go back to Out of Sight one of these days. I remember loving it.
So good. So good.
Back in the day.
Maybe my favorite Soderbergh? I don't know. It's high praise.
It is.
My favorite director.
Top of the top.
All right. Should we walk through the middle section of the movie where it gets worse somehow?
Yeah, let's hear what happened next.
Lieutenant Benny Macko of Internal Affairs, played by Bruce Greenwood, our boy, arrives at the Hollywood station and starts harassing Gavilan and Calden. He breaks into the lockers and makes vague threats, but he doesn't charge them with anything. So Gavilan and Calden continue to pursue the case. They go to a recording studio where they interview Antoine Sartain and some reluctant bystanders. They pick up clues from the coroner and an informant that tie the dead gunman to the murders of H2O Click and another rapper. Then the guys take time to unwind. A yoga student shows up naked in Calden's hot tub, so he jumps in. And the psychic radio host Ruby breaks into Gavilan's house so they have passionate erotic sex, complete with blindfolds, props, and role-playing. God damn you for making me read this scene. After that, the guys catch a break. They finally track down the missing eyewitness, a songwriter named Cairo, who had been hiding in fear of his life. Cairo won't talk, but his mom tells the detectives that Sartain has been killing his artists when they try to get out of their contracts. Then further clues help them connect Leroy and Benny Macko not only to Sartain, but to the death of Calden's dad, a cop who was shot during a drug deal. But just as the detectives start to crack the case, Benny Macko finds out that Gavilan is sleeping with his ex-girlfriend Ruby, and that's the last straw. He arrests Gavilan and Calden and brings them down to the station for interrogation. Motherfuck this movie. Why is all this shit happening? None of this matters.
So much stuff.
Almost none of this matters.
We always say the second act is just packed with stuff happening, and this movie's no exception.
Everything happens so much, and I wish it would happen less.
And I left out a whole subplot. There's the Cleo subplot that we couldn't even mention it,
Cleo.
and we shouldn't even try. There's a Hollywood madam who gives Gavilan some information from time to time, and it becomes a whole other subplot.
Who was the madam in Hollywood that was in the news earlier than this? I think it was the 90s, but
yes, she came from my neighborhood.
Damn, tidbits left and right. Hollywood madam. Heidi Fleiss.
Heidi Fleiss, yes. Her dad was a dentist. He had a little office down the street from me.
Oh, did you go there?
No, I went to a different dentist about 3 blocks away.
Oh.
There you go.
But this movie is crammed with a lot of stuff that they wanted the actors at the premiere to elbow each other, be like, oh, haha, did you see that? Harrison Ford is, every time Josh Hartnett says he wants to be an actor, he's like, why would you want to be an actor? Actors are the fucking worst.
Yeah.
They're all pieces of shit and they suck. And we're all just like, haha, because they're really actors. And then the first time I watched this, admittedly, I was high. I thought Chloe, what's her name?
Cleo.
I thought Cleo and Ruby were the same person, just in a different wig.
That's a real problem. They have 4-letter names and they're women of a certain age and they pop up very sporadically. So
they're both kind of horny for Harrison Ford.
Yeah, it's very hard to keep track of them.
Ruby's extremely horny. Everything she says, she's putting on the noir femme fatale voice. Lena Olin, though, she looks good.
She looks great. Yeah. She's a very charming, charismatic, and good-looking actress.
She's not bad in this movie. She's just in a different movie than everybody else.
And she knows it. She's grinning at everything the whole time. And it's she's laughing at Harrison Ford. She's laughing at the movie she's in. But it works for that character.
Yeah, because she's kind of above it all anyway.
Yeah.
Our boy Bruce Greenwood, he's not great in this.
He's not great.
Actually, you know what? He's not. He's another one that I want to single out as being pretty good. I think I hate his character so much that I was shortchanging his performance because his character makes no sense. He just marches into every room like a rabid dog and demands things. It's you need Internal Affairs still needs warrants and shit to go through your fucking locker. I don't know how he would have gotten those things.
Or a theory of the case. That's what's the problem for me.
He's literally looking for shit and he says it I want to find some dirt.
I'm going to break open your lockers because there's probably something in there that would be a crime. I don't know. And it wasn't. There was just stuff that embarrassed them. Haha. But he's really good at being a nasty asshole. So the scenes kind of come back alive when he gets on screen. And as you pointed out, I think we both noticed this. Harrison Ford comes alive when he's in a scene with Bruce Greenwood. And also some of those scenes are also with Keith David. He's like, finally, good actors, guys that I like. Let's do a scene, you guys, and actually have fun with it.
Does Harrison Ford just hate young people? Does he need does someone at least in their 50s need to be on screen for him to take it seriously? Seriously?
He is such an old fart. That's his thing, man.
Yeah. Also, we'd be remiss not to shout out Keith David. I think this is his 5th movie on the pod.
I assume he's in every movie we do, just for a second.
Literally the patron saint of Blast Zone. We love Keith David. And he doesn't get much to do in this movie, but he's always fine. He's never worse than fine in anything.
No. As much as there was too much in this movie, more Keith David would have made it better.
Absolutely. Also, like, you would want your captain, or is he lieutenant?
Something
whatever his
like
rank
that,
is.
yeah.
He's their boss. He's Gavilan and Calden's boss. Like, if Mako is really like in their shit this much, you would want your commanding officer in the mix to have your back. So it would not have been a stretch to have him in more scenes.
Yeah, and he does just enough of that, keep Mako off their back so that they can keep the movie moving forward. Thankfully, it moves forward.
Not fast enough. This movie's 2 hours long. There's no reason it needed to be that long.
Let's talk about some of these long sequences packed with scenes. We said there's a lot of scenes. One of the main parts of solving this crime is going to the recording studio / record company building of Antoine Sartain. And there's just one thing after another. So many of these scenes make sense on paper. Okay, these cops are going to bust into this record studio and there's going to be a bunch of hip hop producers and they're going to be very preoccupied and they're going to be hostile anyway to the cops. Gavilan's going to win them over. And you're like, oh yes, check that off. That's got to go in the outline right there. That's perfect. And then they go, okay, so how does Gavilan win over this crowd? I don't know. What if he takes out Polaroids of dead bodies and hands one to each guy and goes, hey, look at this. And then they all go, oh my God, we're won over. What can we do to help you?
You've seen dead bodies before? That's awesome. What is this, Stand By Me? Like, what is the draw here?
It's literally like, you see the conflict ramping up. He's trying to get their attention. They're arguing with each other. They're like, what are you doing here, copper? We don't want to talk to you. And then it's like,
I ain't telling you nothing, copper.
The moment of truth is such a letdown in the scene of him just like handing Polaroids to guys and going, look at this. Have you seen this? Look at this picture. And then he wins them over. I'm like, what just happened? What did he do? He showed him Polaroids.
Can you spot the differences in these two pictures? There's 7. They know how to start scenes in this movie, but they don't know how to end them because everything just kind of goes on until it's like, all right, see you later. They all just kind of split. And while he's doing that, Calden is talking up Andre 3000, Mr. Andre Benjamin himself.
Yeah.
Pretty terrible. And the inspiration for the intro joke here, because he hands Calden a script that, quote, has Oscar shit written all over it.
Yes.
Great script writing here.
That could have been funny in terms of like just who this character was. But this is one of those scenes where we talked about the cultural insensitivity of this movie. This scene went over the line into yikes territory for me because let me set up the way I think I see this thing happen. Calden is walking through this studio. There's a whole bunch of hangers on hanging out in this recording studio. And Silk Brown goes, hey, Casey Calden, we went to Crenshaw High together. He's, hey, how you doing? And he's like, what are you doing? Oh, I'm a cop, but I'm trying to... Somehow he mentions acting and he's like, well, we're into acting. Chantel's an actress. And then this is how Calden wins over some more reluctant witnesses. But what happens is they reveal that Chantel is a recognizable face. Calden's like, oh, you're the girl from the Jell-O commercial. She's like the green
blue
Jell-O girl, or the blue Jell-O girl. Thank you. And Calden's like, yeah, I haven't done shit. I've never been on stage before. I'm setting up a showcase, but I've never actually acted. And they're like, oh, but you're a white man, so you must be really important. Please read our script. Please judge us. Please tell me if you like this script that I wrote. And it's like, why is he fawning over
Why
this?
does his opinion matter to you at all? Yeah, like Chantel's a nationally recognizable...
That's a kind of a big deal. So it made me really uncomfortable because they use their extreme desire to impress Officer Calden as his leverage. He's like, tell me, what do you guys know about the murders? And they're like, oh, we don't want to talk about that. We're not snitches. And he's okay, then maybe I won't read your script. And I'm like, oh no, please, please. It's like, dude, what the fuck is this dynamic supposed to be? It was weird and offensive.
They've positioned Calden as like this charismatic Don Juan DeMarco figure who can have any woman he wants, and everybody is so desperate to please him and impress him. But Josh Hartnett is a very handsome man, but I wouldn't call him charismatic, at least not at this point in his career. Like, he doesn't have that magnetism, and the movie's trying to convince us that he does.
It's rough. If the movie was smarter, you'd think maybe it was making some kind of commentary on how beautiful people are given too much deference in the world, but it's not that. It's just bad writing.
Especially because, like, that would be interesting because, like, Harrison Ford, famously beautiful young man, who is now, I think he was in his 60s when he made this movie, and it could have made a commentary about, like, beauty fading and how, like, his circumstances now are worse because he no longer can rely on his looks, but the movie's not interested in any of that.
But he relies on his voice as an anonymous regular caller into a late night AM radio talk show to hook a very hot woman. What happened there?
I don't know what she sees in him. He's a curmudgeon. He's got no money.
And they don't explain it.
No.
The two of them don't have a moment where they come together. They have a moment where she...
Oh, they have a moment where they come together simultaneously orgasming.
But yes, it starts with her breaking in. You're like, wait a minute, have they ever met in person? They must have. But then it keeps sort of making you think that maybe they haven't. He's like, how did you get in?
Oh, I got the vibe they've been fucking for a while.
I mean, that's the only thing that makes sense, but it's actually not supported by the evidence on screen. So that made me just not know what was happening in the first place. But it goes straight to then her tying a tie around his eyes as a blindfold and pulling his pants off. And I was literally yelling out loud in my house, I'm uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable. Stop. And they didn't
To
stop.
whom?
Just to whoever would listen. It didn't work.
Yeah, the scene is unnecessarily erotic.
It's too much.
It goes way too far. I don't know why we needed the blindfolds. And does he pull out like a cat of nine tails or something at one point?
He doesn't quite, but she makes this joke, this bad cop, no donut joke, which is already tired. And then they decide we're going to top that with another zinger, because then the sex montage cuts forward in time. And all of a sudden he's wearing dark aviator sunglasses and nuzzling her neck. And why does he have sunglasses on? But he turns slowly to the right and brings a donut into frame and bites into it as a joke. And I'm like, you can't just pull out a prop in a movie that's supposed to be grounded in reality. Like, this is not The Naked Gun. You don't do prop comedy in a sex scene. But
that was actually a gigantic edible cock ring. He's got a massive dong. So with all the fucking sex toys they had in this scene, who would be surprised? Actually, before the sex scene, isn't that when the repo shootout happens? Like when they leave the recording studio, that's when it all goes down. It's just another way to emphasize Gavilan's money problems. His car is being repoed and he thinks they're car thieves, but he's excited because he's going to get the insurance money. That's just another thing we didn't need.
There's so many scenes because you just said that. I'm like, oh yeah. And then they turn up at the Hollywood producer's house with the car with the spare tire on. And then they negotiate a deal for the house. And then Calden meets a girl that he used to screw. And then they go, there's 10 scenes in between every scene.
Was Martin Landau banging that lady who's like 24?
Yeah, what was she doing at his house? Was she his daughter? Was she his tennis instructor? It's never explained. She's just walking up his driveway.
He wasn't dressed for tennis. Yeah, I think she was just playing tennis there.
She sneaks into the old man's house to use his tennis court because he's too old to know or care.
Could be. All right, so let's talk about Cairo because this is the worst scene in the movie for me. For a lot of reasons. Like, it's uncomfortable from a power dynamic, racial point of view, but also it's just a terrible scene.
It's everything.
So Cairo, played by Corrupt, the famous Dog Pound rapper, him and Daz Dillinger from back in the day, very good rapper, was considered one of the best lyricists on the West Coast because the West Coast always had kind of like the G-Funk vibe, but they weren't as much into the multi-syllable rhymes and stuff like that.
Good
Corrupt
rapping.
was, Corrupt was always heralded as like one of the lyricists from the West Coast. I was always a fan of his growing up. He had a lot of songs I really enjoyed. But he's not bad in this role. He doesn't say much, but he is a witness to a shooting, not a suspect.
Yes.
They chase him, threaten to shoot him, beat the shit out of him. Like they tackle him, like he flips over Harrison Ford's knee.
Yeah.
That's not how you go about getting a statement from a witness in any police department, not even the LAPD in the early aughts. And then they drive him to an abandoned warehouse. What do they keep calling it? Like the Marina Unit or something?
They're like Harbor Division. Yeah, we're going
Harbor Division.
Taking you to Harbor Division. They're actually taking him to the docks.
They're just going to like chain him up in a warehouse and beat the shit out of him with a phone book or something? That's kind of the vibe they're putting off.
No, it's definitely implied that they're about to torture and or kill this guy if he doesn't talk to him. And remember, folks, he's the witness. He's the guy who's
not a suspect.
Scared for his life. He's in hiding because he saw a crime that he thinks is going to get him killed. And maybe it will. Maybe the cops will kill him for not telling.
But before they take him to the Harbor Division, they chase him over and through and across a series of canals and bridges for what felt like half a fucking hour. These people are just like crisscrossing on bridges. Harrison Ford's driving his car and like just trying to keep up with them and like looking from afar. Cairo swims across the canal. Yeah. Josh Hartnett runs across and then he just turns around, swims the other way. And now Josh Hartnett's swimming after him for some, like, it's fucking tedious. It's so bad.
It's a long chase scene and they thought this was going to be a hilarious set piece, not realizing that the viewers would be disturbed and bored at the same time by everything they put us through.
So then they finally catch him because, again, Harrison Ford fucking knees him in the stomach or some shit or trips him.
There's like a drive-by when they get to the warehouse where they're going to torture him.
All right, I was talking about how they got him to the warehouse, how they finally got him in the car.
Okay, yeah.
And then they drive him there and Sartain's goons shoot up the place.
Unload with a massive machine gun.
Yeah.
Basically collapse this abandoned warehouse with all the machine gun fire, but fortunately nobody's hurt.
It was unclear if like they planned for all that like siding to collapse because it felt very kind of perfunctory. 10 seconds goes by after the shooting stops and they're all kind of looking around like, everybody okay? And then all of a sudden the side of the building just collapses.
Would have been funny in another movie. It sounds funny when we describe it.
Yeah, it's not though. It's kind of just awkward.
But the joke is on Cairo because in yet another way, he thought he was about to die as these guys unload giant machine guns in his direction. And ha, you pissed your pants, you dumb idiot. for being scared.
That people are shooting at you with a machine gun.
What's wrong with you? You moron. You got what you deserve for witnessing a crime and being scared about it.
I'm honestly really shocked that Corrupt was on board with that scene. Like the whole thing about he's not gonna snitch, that feels in line with like his persona as a rapper, which by most accounts was not strictly a persona. Like he grew up in a rough area and was in the game for a long time. But pissing yourself, like they famously wanted Idris Elba to piss himself in a scene as Stringer Bell on The Wire, and he was like, absolutely not. That's considered a bridge too far for a lot of actors playing macho characters.
Okay, I didn't know that reference. That's great. That's a very interesting juxtaposition with this.
I know you haven't watched all of The Wire, but once you do, there's an oral history of The Wire that's really interesting called All the Pieces Matter. Pretty much everyone who was anyone on The Wire participated in it and gives an oral history of the making of the show, and that's where I discovered that tidbit. But yeah, it's kind of surprising that he would, although you don't see him in the scene where they're like looking at his pants, his little pee pants. So I wonder if that was like done in reshoots.
Oh shit.
They didn't call him. They were like, we'll just get someone else.
Don't make him actually stand there.
But he's got all his friends coming to the movie premiere with him. He's like, yeah, play the manliest character. I refuse to snitch. I run from the cops. And then all of a sudden he's just pissing himself.
MCP Pants. That was one of my favorite characters on Aqua Teen Hunger Force.
MCP Pants. Good throwback. I forgot about that.
I want candy. Bubblegum and
all right, that's everything I got for this section. You want to walk us through the end?
Oh my God, let's get home. Let's get home before dark. Gavilan and Calden are under arrest and are being held in separate rooms, but each of them finds a comical way to derail their interrogation and foil Mako while their captain buys them a little time. As the internal affairs team tries to grill them, Calden takes off his shoes and he does yoga on the table. Meanwhile, Gavilan closes a real estate deal in an endless series of hilarious phone calls. Now temporarily free and desperate to solve the case, Gavilan asks his new girlfriend Ruby to use her psychic powers to track down Sartain, and it works. They spot Sartain and Leroy in Beverly Hills and start a wild car chase all the way back to Hollywood. Now, split up and on foot, Calden captures Leroy, the dirty cop who killed his father and some other people. And not only that, but Calden gets Leroy to confess to it all on tape. Meanwhile, Gavilan chases Sartain to the roof of a 12-story building where they have a knockdown, drag-out fistfight, and Sartain falls off the roof to his death. The murders are solved, our heroes are cleared of wrongdoing, and Benny Mako is arrested for his ties to the bad guys. Gavilan and Ruby are a happy couple. And although Calden ends his week by staging a successful acting showcase, when the phone rings, both detectives jump at the call to get back to work together, solving the next Hollywood homicide.
I'm sorry. I just need to call out before we get into anything else the idea that Harrison Ford would beat Isaiah Washington in a fist fight in 2003 is fucking absurd. How dare they?
He has that Rick Deckard resilience to take a lot of punishment and keep going.
Because he was a fucking replicant.
He didn't know that.
I'm team Deckard as a replicant. I don't even know. Is it even a question anymore, or has it been pretty much definitively solved?
You're probably right. But he did feel a pain when he was putting his fingers back together. Anyway, they kind of redo that motif here. Am I wrong?
A little bit, yeah.
He's chasing the bad guy up and through the architectural details of an old Hollywood building, and he's pushed through a window and they're climbing facades and stuff. It had some of that feel of Deckard versus Roy Batty.
This movie's got references for sure, so I wouldn't be surprised if that was what they were going for. But unfortunately, I had already finished my second watch by the time I heard note about it, so I just have to remember it because I'm not putting this movie on a third time.
I thought you were going to say I had already finished my second joint and I was too late.
I can do half a joint before I watch a movie for the pod. I don't want to be in a green out situation. Let's talk about this fucking interrogation scene, because another scene that I really hate. I feel like I'm saying that about all of them, but I really hated this scene.
It's bad. It's real bad.
It has no idea what it's trying to accomplish.
Because we don't know all of a sudden, we don't know what the stakes are. That's one of the. We'll talk about how the comedy is really bad that they attempt, but we don't know why Michael brought them in or what he's trying to get out of them at this moment. He kind of brings them in just because he's really pissed because he found out that Ruby is dating Gavilan and that's his ex, and so he pulls the trigger, maybe prematurely, and maybe that's the point.
She's got a thing for cops.
She does. She admits to it.
There's a lot of people in the city of Los Angeles. I don't know why you have to stick with that, but whatever.
She loves a bastard. She does. But yeah, then the guys go, I think it felt to me like the screenwriters didn't know how to get them out of these interrogation rooms. So they just went full Bugs Bunny logic and they made them kind of like
annoy them to the point where like,
yeah, they're like annoying them or bamboozling them. And like Greenwood, who was a believable asshole earlier, is now stomping around in the back room because he can see into both rooms through the two-way glass. And he's just pulling his hair out. Oh my God, why can't we ask them any questions? What's going on? And of course, it doesn't make makes sense because
first of all, they're cops. They know you haven't charged them in anything. They have no need to talk to you. Like, they understand the rules of interrogations. You bring them in with no charge and they're just like, tell me illegal things you do. And you're shocked that they're not just like, okay.
Yeah.
You know, it's pretty bad writing.
It's bad. Calden is in his socks, cross-legged on the table. Like, somehow that wins over the female internal affairs detective who's supposed to be interrogating him. And she's like, can you help me with my back pain? And it's like, oh God. And then,
So he's a chiropractor too now, apparently.
And then what is Gavilan doing? He's just closing this deal. He keeps getting calls back from Master P and Martin Landau, and he's trying to like close this house deal. But we're like, this is the same joke that's been playing through the whole movie. And it's like, okay, you tried to escalate it, but we've been tired of this joke for 45 minutes.
They've been haggling over price for the entirety of the movie, and I'm just fucking sick of it. I don't care who gets this house. It means nothing to me.
Yep.
All right. And then the rest of the movie is basically just the chase, right?
It's just a chase scene after that. Kind of, thank goodness. It's pretty stock standard the way you expect an action movie to play out. Long car chase, long multiple foot chases, a lot of helicopter coverage as they go crashing their way through Hollywood and West Hollywood. And
it's not bad. It's just tedious. It goes on a little too long.
There's a lot of stunts. There's a lot of bits.
I don't have much specifically to say about the chase that I haven't already said. I find it offensive that they think Harrison Ford would win this fight.
Yes. Should I give my kudos? Because I had a couple spots where I laughed.
Yeah.
I wanted to admit that the movie wasn't all
Let's do it.
discomfort. At one point, they go into Hollywood and Highland, which is like a 2-story outdoor mall thing. And for some reason, Josh Hartnett's there, he's chasing down Dwight Yoakam. He's on the second level. He's got to get down to the first level. And he jumps down onto this souvenir kiosk. I don't know why I even thought that was a good way to get down, but it's like a little kiosk
that was funny.
Full of like trinkets with a little cloth roof over it. The stunt is excellent. As far as physical comedy goes, of like a man falling down, it's a really good one. It just looks really painful. And
he just eats shit and is like, oh, kind of done in The Other Guys to a bigger degree later, a few years later. But yeah, he's clearly just like fucked up from the fall, which was a good joke. That's a good bit. I enjoyed. Yeah. But also, this is another example where like it should have been the other two. I understand that there's like real emotional stakes to have Calden and Leroy face off because Leroy was involved in his dad's death. But like Dwight Yoakam and Harrison Ford are much more physically matched equally.
Oh yeah, that's
and Isaiah Washington and Josh Hartnett are too. I can't fathom that Josh Hartnett can't catch Dwight Yoakam in a foot race.
Takes him a while.
How is Dwight Yoakam lasting more than 5 seconds outrunning him? And you wouldn't have had to do too much work on the script to make that fight make sense. It would have been way better.
It would have made more sense action-wise. But yeah, like you said, it pays off. And Hartnett does this big dumb acting scene / bit where he tricks Dwight Yoakam and then turns the tables on him. I don't know. That was supposed to be emotionally loaded, and it was supposed to be one of those hero cop moments where he overcomes his incredible lifetime of pain and anger to not kill the bad guy and actually bring him in. But it was like, I get it.
Yeah.
One other funny moment. At some point, Gavilan crashes his car and gets out on the street, but is still trying to catch up desperately to Sartain. So he tries to commandeer another car, and a big dude gets out and says, no fucking way. So he grabs this pink cruiser bicycle from a young girl. And just the way he yells at her, like screams in her face and steals her bike, was a funny moment. I had to give Harrison Ford credit. That was sheer like mania kind of move right there. I'm like, okay, that worked. And then it's dumb. He's riding a pink cruiser down the street and honking the little horn to get people out of his way. And it's silly, but Harrison Ford is actually pretty good with the comedy, and he was into it. He actually sold that little bit.
Fun fact, that was not in the script. Harrison Ford just hates children and joy. So he saw a little girl on a bike and he's like, I'm going to steal that little kid's bike and yell at her.
Man, what an improviser.
He's always working.
But then there was a couple other moments where I felt like the comedy went too far. Calden commandeers a van, and there's young children in the back, and they're afraid of dying, and he's going on this whole metaphysical rant. But meanwhile, he's really threatening their lives the way he's driving this van around. I'm like, that doesn't feel funny.
I take back some of those kudos.
You got to. I was just ready to hand him over.
Taking Back Kudos, one of my favorite emo bands. Big fan of theirs.
And then Gavilan jumps into this elevator as he's trying to chase Sartain up to the top level of this building. And instead of letting this group of women out, he makes sure the door closes on them all. And he's not holding them at gunpoint, but they're fucking terrified because he's insane and sweating and drooling and panting with a gun. And that didn't feel funny either.
I think a lot of the quote unquote jokes in this movie missed the mark in that way, where they just didn't know where to end them, like where the line was, and it ended up being a bummer. So I hate this movie.
Wasn't good. Sorry.
This movie sucks.
Folks. We try to find the good things. We almost found a couple there and we took them back.
Take those kudos right back. Should we talk about where some of the players involved in this movie ended up, what they're up to?
Yeah, I assume Harrison Ford never did a movie again after this embarrassment.
Yeah, he retired. No, Ron Shelton, you may remember his name. We did talk about him. He wrote Blue Chips.
Yes.
So we talked about him in Blue Chips.
Didn't direct that one. We had the nasty Billy Friedkin on set to direct
That's right.
that semi turkey, but
I still like Blue Chips. I also like The Great White Hype, which was a boxing movie that Ron Shelton wrote but didn't direct. But I don't think the budget for The Great White Hype is public, so I don't know if we'll ever be able to cover it.
Oh, that's right. I think you brought that up.
I'm fairly certain it's a bomb, but we might be bending the rules if we cover it. Also, we don't need to do another Ron Shelton movie right away. We've got time.
We can take a break.
He's had an interesting career, though. So like I said, he was a minor league baseball player, wrote Bull Durham, considered maybe the greatest sports movie ever, at least certainly in the conversation. But then he wrote a lot of sports movies until he broke away from that. He wrote Bad Boys 2. He wrote and directed Cobb, which I think, was that an HBO movie? Either way, it was very good. Tommy Lee Jones playing Ty Cobb. You could not have a better marriage of actor and subject.
I remember that coming out and thinking that looks right.
Seek it out if you can. It's pretty good. Ty Cobb, just a real piece of shit. No allegedly needed. His last movie, not Ty Cobb, talking about Ron Shelton again, was 2017's Just Getting Started, which was one of those like old people can still have fun movies.
Oh,
which I've never enjoyed one of those. It was Morgan Freeman and Tommy Lee Jones. Him and Tommy Lee Jones have a good working relationship, but he's 77 years old.
Okay.
But Just Getting Started was a bomb. So hard to say if he hasn't worked since then because he chose to or because they were like, well, enough. You're done now.
Maybe it's enough from both of them. Yeah, you got to give him credit for making some actual quality movies, some real big ones during his career. And nobody gets it right every time.
Harrison Ford did say not only did he hate the movie, he said it was the worst movie he ever made.
Interesting.
Which he made 6 Days, 7 Nights. So that's saying quite a bit.
Okay, I haven't seen that, thankfully.
So Harrison Ford's made some bad movies, but he's made more good ones than bad. He wouldn't act again until 2006. So this comes out in 2003. He would just take 3 years off. And then he made Firewall, which I'm sure that sounds like a movie. And then he made the worst Indiana Jones movie in 2008, Crystal Skull, absolute dog shit. He's stayed busy. He's been in some blockbuster flops like Cowboys and Aliens, previous episode, Blade Runner 2049, future episode, and Ender's Game, also future episode. He's also popped up in The Force Awakens, The Rise of Skywalker, so he's staying in his Han Solo role occasionally. He's currently starring in Shrinking on Apple TV, which I did not watch, got mixed reviews.
Yeah, I heard good things.
Yeah, it's a good cast. I don't know. He'll be in the upcoming Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, and he'll also be in the Thunderbolts and Captain America New World Order, assuming that Marvel keeps making movies, because I don't know, it's not going so hot for them lately.
They're a little rough patch here, but that's very interesting. I don't know what role he's playing in the Indiana Jones movie at this point. I go back to my old joke where he's playing the mummified skeleton that pops out of the wall. I'm always down for an adventure movie about a dial because dials are really interesting to me.
They're one of the most cinematic things, just turning that dial. No, I know very little about the upcoming Indiana Jones movie, and I plan to keep it that way until I see it. But I'm not like an Indiana Jones fanboy, so if it sucks, I will be honest and it won't hurt me.
That's a good way to go in.
Let's talk about Hartnett a little bit. So we talked about him quite a bit in the Black Dahlia episode because he is truly the lead of that movie. But he bounced back from this, but he also made his fair share of flops. He made Town and Country in 2001, which was a huge flop. I'm always shocked when I see the budget of that movie. It's like 90 million. Makes no sense. He made Pearl Harbor in 2001, which made money, but probably didn't help his career a ton because people hated it so much. And then the Black Dahlia would come in 2006, but he had some good stuff too. He was in Sin City, Lucky Number 11, which I personally don't care for, but a lot of people really like.
Okay.
And 30 Days of Night, which I fucking love. That's a great vampire movie. If you're ever in the mood for just a kind of small, self-contained, creepy vampire movie, 30 Days of Night is a good time.
I remember liking it. I remember seeing it and thinking, oh, this was really cool and kind of special and unique. And I didn't clock Hartnett in it at all. It was probably at a point where I was not paying that kind of attention to actors.
I don't think it's a big showy role for him either. He's pretty workmanlike in it, but it's fine. I stand by my theory that he's a good actor now, but he wasn't necessarily when he was younger. But he expressed being uncomfortable with fame at the height of his heartthrob status. He ended up taking a 15-month break from acting. I think this was around the time he turned down both Batman and Superman, which directors kind of stopped coming to him with big roles, high prominence roles, because he was seen as flaky, unreliable. And when he returned, he's done a lot of smaller projects and supporting roles. He's been working with Guy Ritchie a lot lately. He was in Wrath of Man in 2021 and the recent Operation Fortune Rue de Guerre, which I watched yesterday and quite enjoyed. It's silly, it's light, it's breezy in that kind of way newer Guy Ritchie movies have been, but he's really good in it. It's got a stacked cast. It's got Statham, of course, because you can't make a Guy Ritchie movie without Statham lately. But Aubrey Plaza pops up, and I really like the energy she brings to a Guy Ritchie movie.
Neat. Yeah.
Wouldn't have expected that. And you could feel like she's ad-libbing her lines, or at least had some input in the script.
Okay.
I've got Hugh Grant, Carrie Ells, like really fun movie. I would recommend anyone just looking for kind of a slightly lighter fare to check it out.
I will have to check that out.
Lena Olin, she works steadily. She's done some smaller movies, but lots of TV. She had a recurring role on Alias. She was in Welcome to Sweden, Riviera, and Hunter. Hunters. She popped up in Mindhunter.
Oh, that's a good
So
one.
she's still a working actor. And then let's talk a little bit about Isaiah Washington, because I alluded to the fact that he seems like an asshole, but I wanted to give some background so I'm not just talking shit.
Yeah.
So in 2005, he joined the cast of Grey's Anatomy, which was a big break for him. And he lasted, I think, a couple seasons. I was still watching the show back then. But he was dismissed after using homophobic language during an argument with Patrick Dempsey. And the language was reportedly directed at his co-star, T.R. Knight, who is a gay man who was not openly gay at the time.
Okay.
And then the press got wind of it, and he basically had to come out nationally because of Isaiah Washington kind of airing his dirty laundry. But it doesn't end there. The good time, he was dismissed after that, of course.
Okay.
Rightly. He was unrepentant, though, after his dismissal. He's just like, oh, yeah, fuck him. I didn't do anything wrong. And he's kind of a crazy right-wing weirdo now. He starred in the most recent, or maybe the second to most recent, God's Not Dead movie. There's 5 or 6 of them now. He was in the 4th one.
I was just Googling that title when I saw that note, and I'm like, oh, is that another Guy Ritchie thing? And like, no, it's not. This is something very different.
He's gone down that James Woods, Kevin Sorbo rabbit hole. We don't get much work anymore, so it must be woke people's fault.
Yeah.
Not the fact that I'm an asshole who's not a great actor anyway. Isaiah Washington is actually a pretty good actor.
We would have liked to see him walk a different path in life that didn't trouble us, but as long as we're still expert at separating the art from the artist, we can enjoy his little part in this movie.
So that was Hollywood Homicide, not my favorite movie we've covered, but we're kind of sticking with the same vibe for next week. We're doing another buddy cop movie, but with a little bit more serious tone, a little more, not more star-studded, because Harrison Ford and Josh Hartnett were both big names in 2003, but somehow we've made it almost 100 episodes. We haven't done a Michael Mann movie yet.
Wow.
So we're doing our first Michael Mann movie, Miami Vice.
Exciting.
As Colin Farrell's getting a lot of press right now for his Banshees of Inisherin performance. So let's capitalize. Let's do some back when the dark times of Colin Farrell's career.
Let's just change the city, and then we'll change the division within the police department, and we'll have a whole other movie.
Yeah.
Hollywood Homicide to Miami Vice.
Let's do it. I'm excited for this one. I haven't seen it in a long time, but I remember liking it more than people gave it credit for at the time.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to checking it out. I was a big Miami Vice fan back in the day as a kid, so we're going to get all into that next week.
Oh, yeah. We're going to have to see how the movie compares to the show because I don't have much of a reference point for the show. Thank you guys so much for listening. Please remember to rate, review, subscribe to the pod if you can. Follow us on Twitter at BlastZonePod. You can email us, blastzonepod@gmail.com. Questions, feedback, suggestions for movies, and we'll see you next time in the Blast Zone.
See you next time in the Blast Zone.
The Blast Zone.